All right, welcome to a re-recording of Learning Plan 5 with sound. I just had a student this week point out to me that she was gone last week or 2 weeks ago and is a little behind and was therefore just getting to Learning Plan 5, even though at the time we were on 6, and she said there's no sound. I did know that there was no sound to Learning Plan 6, and I went into work over spring break and re-recorded that. So this one goes back to before spring break, and it was the absolute starting of working through HTML. I am a little worried, to be honest, that only one student in this online class pointed out that the recording had no sound and that it came almost a week and a half, 2 weeks after the fact. So I'm kind of worried that perhaps either you guys just followed along silently and it worked, or you didn't do it. Because at the bottom of this learning plan, as you see in 5, it said no homework this week. So perhaps some of you thought you'd do it later, and maybe later never happened. So here it is with sound. A couple things new. I added this template.html that you can download. Basically, this is what it looks like. It's already typed in for you. If not, this is just the basic skeleton of a website that you have to start with. And if that file doesn't work or you don't want to use it, you should always have this. It starts with doctype HTML, and then the opening HTML tag is at the top, the closing is at the bottom, and then behind it we specify that the language is English. The opening and closing head tags, again, this is the stuff that does not show up on the actual web page. It shows up in search engine results, it shows up in your browser tabs. That's where this title goes. And then the character set of UTF-8 is just a standard that we have to use. Then you have your opening and closing body tags, and everything in between the two body tags is what actually shows up on your website. So this is what brackets looks like. It's very, very similar to Notepad++ that I can use on a PC, but I am on my Mac right now. Instead of having tabs at the top like you do, I see my pages over here on the left, and these are just some getting started files that explains what brackets is about. So going back, as you follow along, I'll try to remind you in Notepad++ how to do things that are different, which is really only 1 or 2 things. So we have a PowerPoint that I'm going to go through, and then we're going to work through this HTML booklet. If you click on this link, you are going to get the booklet. Basically, it's pages from an actual textbook, and it was scanned vertically, but up here, if you click on this rounded arrow sign, it will flip for you so you can follow along a little bit easier. And I'm sorry, I'm on a Mac. Control+ on your PC will zoom in so you can see what we're going to be working on. We're going to start by just going through a quick PowerPoint, and we're going to stop every now and then to actually work on some of the exercises in that handout. So make sure you have the handout downloaded and you have Notepad++, or you have brackets if you're on a Mac. So we're starting with basic HTML. So we're going to learn how to format this, how to configure text with inline elements, phrase elements, line breaks, special characters, and some other things. So the very first thing that we're going to learn about is what is a heading element. And heading level 1 uses the tags h1 and then at the end close h1, \h1. If you forget the backslash or you forget this tag entirely or the caret or anything about this, it won't work, and everything following it will still be in the heading 1 size. Because there's no style applied to this, how the heading actually looks is browser dependent. So in Google, for example, Chrome, heading 1s might be 20 point Times New Roman bold, and they all might be Times New Roman. And then heading 2 might be 18 point, 16 point, 14, 12, 10, whatever. That's just an example. But they're always bold, and level 1 headings are always the biggest, and they have the most importance from a accessibility standpoint, which we'll see in just a minute. So the hands-on on page 26 talks about using that template document that I gave you and then to modify it as shown on page 28 in that handout, which is actually, son of a gun, page 26. So I'm not in a mode that I can edit that, I guess, but you need to be on page 26 in this handout. So let's go into your Notepad++, and if you don't have that template file open, please do that, or type it in exactly as you see here. Hit pause if you need to, and join me when you're ready. The next thing we need to do is, according to this page 26 in our book, we're just going to change the title to say heading example. And this is what, again, would appear in search engine results, and it would appear in the tab of your web browser. It's what would show up here. This is what the title is of a page. All right, the next thing they want us to do is, in the body, they want us to experiment with these heading 1 tags and all the way down. So just follow along, do opening caret H1, closing caret, and say this is a heading level 1, not a heading. That's something new. And they want you to do that for all 6. There's 6 H's available that we're going to do. I'm just going to copy and paste and then change out the details because it's going to be just a little bit easier and faster than typing all along. Remember, I'm showing you that I'm taking out some spaces every now and then or adding them. That's perfectly acceptable because when a computer reads the code, it just reads top to bottom, right to left, and the fact that I bumped down a line here means nothing to it. We are going to see these headings actually stack up on new lines, and that's because we headings automatically put some space before and after them. So I'm changing my closing tags, and this is just faster than straight typing for me anyway. And then I also have to change the label in here. Whoops, that one is a 1. This one's a 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, in Notepad, you would do a file save, or you would click on the little save icon that's up here in brackets. I'm going to do a file save, or Command S. And then in Notepad++, in your menu options at the top, one of the options is going to be Run, and then Launch in Chrome as a drop-down. It's about right here. A little bit different in brackets, we have to do a live preview over here, and that might have turned it off. So I'm going to go live preview, and it's going to put it over here. I guess we have it open twice. So here it is, and it shows how my default browser, Google Chrome, handles them. You can see that they get smaller, and you can think of this also something like making an outline, how your main outline points would be largest, and then you would have bullet points or smaller sections within. And the reason that that is that we, I'm going to bump to this slide, heading tags are important because they help make your website more accessible and usable, because they help to outline the structure of your page content. They use hierarchy, therefore we know that a heading level 1 is more important than a level 3, for example. So when websites are doing a search result, anything that's a heading 1 quite often appears as a kind of a subpoint when you get your search results. All right, the other big reason that we use tags like this, H1s, is that screen readers often configure the software to display a list of the headings used on a page to kind of give those people an outline of the main important parts. So anything that's in a H1 is presumed to be of great importance. So going back one slide here, why doesn't the heading tag go in the head section? This is going to be confusing because we have headings, we have head, and we eventually will have headers. They may seem similar, but they're not. So the head section is this section right here in your code. Everything in here is what search engines use. It's what your tabs in the browser show. It does not show up on your page. The heading set tags, H1s, H2s, etc., those actually show up in the body because those are physical tags that we see in the body. So don't be confused by those two words. All right, the next thing that we're going to look at is the paragraph element and how we stylize something with a paragraph. Instead of hitting return as we're typing, because that means absolutely nothing in code, we actually have to put some sort of written code to let the devices know that we need to move on to the next paragraph, the next line break, something like that. So paragraph elements are coded with a P tag, and automatically it puts some empty space above and below the paragraph. So there's no need to hit enter twice, for example, like you might on a keyboard or a typewriter. That's actually done for you as part of the paragraph. So let's move on. The page number is actually page 29, and we're going to go on and practice with this next section. So in your handout, page 29, we're going to change this one that we have right now. Instead of being a heading example, we're going to have this be a paragraph example. And we're going to change in the body. We're going to continue to have an H1 that says heading level 1, but then after it, we're actually going to put a paragraph of type. So opening caret P, whoops, closing caret, good grief. And apparently brackets is configured to write the closing tag for me because I didn't do that. That is a feature that you can turn on in Notepad++, but while you're learning, I strongly recommend you just simply type everything in. So our paragraph that we're going to type in is, this is a sample paragraph. And then I'm just going to put a bunch of gibberish, and the reason I'm doing that is to just show you how a big paragraph looks. And then at the end, whatever you type in, close it with the \P tag to close out your paragraph. Save your document. And then over here in our live heading, when we hit refresh, or in Notepad++, again, you're going to say run, launch in Chrome, or view in Chrome. Paragraph example, this is the title part that we did over here, and that's what shows up in your browser tabs. And now here's a sample paragraph and a bunch of gibberish written behind it. I'm going to backspace that out. That. File save, and come over here and refresh. All right, the reason that this all bumped down to the next line is because I don't have any kind of a return hit here. I was trying to figure out what was going on, but because there's no spaces here, this views this all as one large word and it can't fit it here, so it bumped it down a line. So my example might be better if I faked it just a little bit better by putting in spaces every now and then as if these were actually words, and saved it and refreshed it. There we go. So notice that above and below headings, H1, H2, H3, there's a little space automatically. We did not tell these to go down to a separate line or add space. It just happened because they're headings, H1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then also a paragraph automatically has a little bit of space before and after it. So we don't need to do that return like you would on a keyboard. All right. Alignment, left align is the default, I'm sorry. And we used to do alignment right in the HTML code, and we're not doing much of any of that. To tell you the truth, a lot of the stylizing that we're doing here, like bold and italics that we're going to learn in a little bit, we don't really do it in HTML anymore. We do that in the style sheets, the CSS that we already are learning about because, of course, this is 2-3 weeks ago and we've already talked about style. So the alignment, we'll learn about how to handle that, how to make it centered or right aligned or left aligned is the default, but how to change that we'll learn later. All right. When writing for web page design, avoid long paragraphs. When we're reading online, we don't have the same ability to read like a book in front of us with many, many lines and long paragraphs. Keep things small, and that really helps the reader, helps our eye rest and get through the navigation of your web page. All right, the next thing we're going to learn is the break tag, and this is how we intentionally force writing to go down one line and put that blank line in. The tag itself is BR for break, line break, and it's a standalone tag, which means you don't have to close it out at the end. So you would say blah, 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 break tag, and it would automatically force the next line to start down here on a new line. We're actually going to page 30. and we're going to practice the next exercise, hands-on practice 2.3 on page 30 in your handout. All they really want us to do is this pretend messy little paragraph that we made here. We're going to force, I'm going to clean that up so it's just a bunch of little words here. We're going to intentionally force a line break. So this is a sample paragraph, period. And if we wanted to go down a line from there, we'd put in the break code, BR, inside of the brackets. And that will force it, if I save the file and jump over here, it's going to force it to go down a line. So again, if I wanted a line break after this point, all I would have to do is put in that BR tag and save the file and refresh it in my preview, and it did another line break. So hitting enter on your keyboard, let me show you that. I'll start right here. You can't, oh, I can't type either. Fingers in the wrong spot. You can't simply hit enter on your keyboard, period. Enter is what I just did. That won't work. It went down a line in my code in Notepad or brackets, but in real life, as we refresh over here on the web, it didn't work. And I'm going to make my browser size just a little bit smaller, the browser window. You can see how it's just text wrapping to fill whatever size browser window I have. But you can't simply hit enter on your keyboard. That won't work. Right here's where I hit enter, does not work. So if I wanted that to go down, I have to do a break tag just like that. Save it, refresh it. Now I have a break tag right here and it actually works. So that's a line break. The next code tag that we're going to look at is the horizontal rule element, HR. You can think of that as a line. That's what a rule is. This is also a void element. There's just one tag. It does not need to be closed. This you're not going to use all too often. Don't put this between paragraphs. I'm not even sure that you need to use it or that you'll see it much, but just to see how it works, I'll show you. We'll put one between the heading level 2 and 3. So in between these two, we're going to put a horizontal rule tag or an HR tag. Save your file and refresh it, and there's your horizontal rule. And again, depending on the size of your browser window, this is just going to stretch to fill that whole space. So when you type in HR, this is what you get. The way it looks, its color, its line size is all dependent on the browser, unless later on we give it style rules and we tell it to be a certain width and a certain color or something like that. Without any rules, it's just going to be your browser default, and that's what you will get. All right, moving on in your handout, we have the black quote element, and this indents a block of text for special emphasis. And don't use this just to indent type. There's a better way of doing that. But think of an actual quote where you have the person's name followed by a quote they said. Use it in a case like that, and it would actually push the quotation in and indent it. So the practice is on page 33 in your handout, and it's hands-on practice 2.5. We're not going to literally type in everything they have here, but let's just change our title so that we do see how it changes here when we refresh. The title, we're going to call it Black Quote Example. And then in our body, we are going to have a heading 1, and we're going to say, this is a black quote example. And then I'm also going to say maybe the person's name by Brenda. This is my quote. So then we're going to have our actual quote. So in our handout, they start with a heading 1 and then an actual paragraph. So the paragraph is just going to give some information. So I could say, here is a famous quote by Brenda. And that's my paragraph. After that, I'm going to start the actual block quote. So I'm going to use the tag block quote, and then the end block quote tag, and then whatever I put inside of these two tags will actually be indented. Oh my gosh, I can't type. There's no business like show business. That's my famous quote. Ha ha. All right. And then we have the end block quote. So this, if we save our file and then jump over to our live preview or refresh our preview, if you're in Notepad++, you can see that the title updated up here, the title in the head section. This is a heading 1, this is a paragraph, and here's the block quote itself. It indented. So if this were several sentences, they would all be indented right here, not just like a tab. So there is an example of the block quote, and that gets us up to page 33.